hello, welcome. Good afternoon. We'd like to welcome you to our webinar as you're popping on here. This webinar is about the application of adaptive leadership. We're excited to have you join us. We are featuring a special guest, Jason Lody, CEO of Eventus Education. So I know everyone's just popping on as you join us. State your name in the chat box and where you're joining us from. I'm joining from Land O'Lakes, Florida, and I hate to brag, but we do have some sun today. It's a nice 70 degrees here, so I don't want to get too much hate yet, but welcome. Thank you for joining us. I know we're just taking a couple minutes as we get logged on and join. Again, this is the webinar, The Application of Adaptive Leadership, where we are featuring a wonderful guest, Jason Lody, CEO of Eventus Education. And my name is Danielle Benedict, joining from Florida again. If you are just joining us, please give us your name and tell us where you're joining us from. We'll just take a minute. Oh, welcome. Brenda from Chicago. Ooh. Sarah from North Carolina, welcome. Treese, hi. Just got to see you yesterday. Raina, welcome. Kelsey, welcome. Dion from Texas. Hopefully it's starting to warm up for you all. Welcome. Patty from Ohio. Kathy from Florida. Welcome. Dayla from Chicago. Again, if you're just now joining us, we're super excited about this webinar. Let us know your name and where you're joining from. Dr. Isabel Linez from Washington, welcome. We're so happy to have you here. We're looking forward to a great conversation. We have planned a very powerful discussion for you today, so we're happy to have you join us. My name is Danielle Benedict. I am the Business Development and Channels Director here at Inspire Care 360. I've had many roles in the last 17 years, but the one I enjoy the most is really advocating and caring for owners and directors so they can just focus on what's most important, is inspiring those, providing those quality environments for our children. So I'm coming to you from Land O'Lakes, Florida. As you're hopping on, state your name in the chat box and just let us know where you're joining from. Welcome, Alexis from Newport. Brittany, welcome. As we're joining. Okay, so as you're popping on here, I do want to point out just a couple things for you. If you look at the bottom two text boxes at the bottom of your screen, one is a chat box. So you are introducing yourself. Looks like everyone's familiar with the chat box. You can also put general comments in the chat box there. And then there's a Q&A box. So here you're going to submit questions that you may have here. And I'll keep an eye. Sarah will be on here keeping an eye on the questions. And we will be answering those throughout. So if you have any questions, feel free to utilize those. Welcome, Ray. As you're joining us, if you've popped on while I'm introducing, please type your name in the chat box and where you're coming from. Okay, so what we're going to discuss today, we've got a few things on the agenda. We are going to be doing some housekeeping items, taking a look at our ECE University, as well as our star rating and reputation management system. Then we're going to meet our wonderful guest, Jason Lody, followed by a great discussion on adaptive leadership. And make sure you stay till the very end, because as you can see, we'll be announcing the winner of the $100 gift card from Discount School Supply. So you don't want to miss that for sure. And if you've just joined, please put your name in the chat box and where you're coming from. Welcome, Kutana Brown from Newport. Let's see, we've had quite a few join. This is going to be exciting. Maggie, welcome from Texas. Welcome. And just a reminder, if you are seeking CEU credits for today, you are going to just drop your, you'll need to follow this link. Oh, Sarah just put it. I was just trying to get it in there. You're going to follow the link for your certificate and it'll take you right. If for some reason you have any issue, send me a message in the chat box and I'll get you set up with that certificate. But thank you. Follow the link in the chat box to get your CEUs today. So I'm glad that you're going to be joining us. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our amazing host, Tony D'Agostino. Tony owns and operates 4 of his own early childhood education schools. He's also the founder here at Inspire Care 360, as well as an inspirational leader and a mentor. Welcome, Tony.
Danielle, you're just too nice. You're just too nice. Thank you so much, Danielle. I really
welcome.
appreciate it. You are the shining star. You actually spend this time and really make people feel warm and comfortable. And that's all
Thank
today.
you. Thank you,
So
Tony.
thank you for handing over the baton on this great opportunity for us today. So I will be talking to you soon. I know you'll be in the background. So if anybody has any questions for Danielle, anything we talk about, and some of the housekeeping items, or just wants to find things out, she is absolutely there to respond to you, as well as I am too. So thank you, Danielle.
You're welcome.
Awesome. So I'm going to take the baton here and I'm going to move forward on a few things. And let's take a look at what we have here today. First, just what was mentioned a second ago. Stay to the end. We are going to choose one gift card. I'm going to probably ask Danielle to help us with that in the background so I don't forget at the very end, because I have a tendency to forget things like this, but this is a great giveaway from our friends over at Discount School Supply. We have been working with them, gosh, now for over 10 years. And just for those who are not aware of, they are one of our preferred GPO providers, where we offer discounts on not only everyday pricing for them, but all their drop ship pricing, anything that they bring to the table. We have discounts up to 20% that come off if you're part of our subscription. So it's a great way to get ongoing significant discounts. I know for my schools, I have to always buy different things every month for our curriculum supplies, and they've been a great place to go to for us. Let's move on to the next slide here. This one is really important. You're going to start seeing, for those of you who have been on recently, you may have seen some of this. You're going to see some new branding colors. Number one, you probably see it in the background in our office here, our new logo. Inspire Care 360 has a new brand logo, and we also rebranded Inspire University to ECE University. We were able to curate that domain and that brand name to trademark it, as well as we believe it really speaks to the holistic solution of what we offer for content delivery and management. And the reasons we say it for content delivery is because our platform allows you to easily build and deliver your own content, whether you want to take a video of a staff meeting, whether you want to build out an e-course where we have the tools built in for that, you want to deliver your own PowerPoint, PDF, Word documents, Excel, pretty much any modality you can easily build in our course. And when we say build, you're like, well, that sounds very difficult. Nope, we have it constructed where you almost are dragging and dropping that content, and then you can keep on assigning it ongoing forever. Also, you have the ability to put your own forms in there. So you could put your onboarding forms for staff as well as families to deliver it directly to them. You know when the content has been delivered. You know when someone has opened it up. You also know when someone has completed it as part of the university. Of course, our university offers over 200 hours of continuing education unit qualified professional and teachership development. Now, when we differentiate between professional and teachership, what we're saying is professional is really for teachers to become better teachers, administrators to become better administrators, owners to become better owners. Teachership development is really about teachers becoming a better teacher for teaching the child and understanding how to run the programs in their rooms, how to run stations, managing behavioral elements, working with the pyramid model, multitudes on that area. And that's why we offer both of that in our overall courseware, very diverse courseware. The other element is that we offer something that's unique in this marketplace and extremely competitive. Typically, a CDA can go anywhere from $500 to $1,000, especially if they're on site. With our online CDA program, 121-hour gold standard program, it's $199 per individual for all of that courseware. That is a huge opportunity, a huge discount. And also we have the renewals too for the CDAs. Those are our member prices for those who are subscribers to us. We do have non-member pricing for that, but this is to highly encourage people to come to us and become part of our ongoing family. Then we've also just added brand new 16-hour enrollment growth academy. This is something we had a lot of requests for, and we developed it because you folks were asking for it. Owners and operators of schools were saying, you know what, our enrollments are a little soft. We are really doing better at recruiting some staff now because of how the economy is, but we really need to focus on growing our enrollment. This program really helps your administrative team as well as your teachers, but mainly for your administrative team to look at their marketplace and understand it. It is also about how to build and deliver school direct marketing. So what I mean by that is you might have a person who puts Google ads up for you. You may have a person who does some posts on social media. That's perfect, and you should be doing things like this. But looking at your community, understanding what are your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunity, your threats. What are the other schools doing in your vicinity as to what you're doing and how you should uniquely position yourself? That's what this courseware is for, is to definitely dive deep to make sure that you have consistency for your administrative team in going in and understanding. We do have pricing for that associated if you are a subscriber or if you're a non-subscriber. And that's something Danielle can answer for you. And of course, our peak performance, our performance merit and management system, this is a program that really automates the development of competency for your team. It's not just training. It is on the job in your own classrooms, in your own environment, applying their knowledge and being observed with that. So this is all some stuff that you can have delivered all through this one platform. And our latest and greatest announcement is that all of our courseware now will be in Spanish in addition to English, and soon to come is French. We will be having all of our courseware available in French. This is going to help us obviously for all of North America, but in addition to that too, we are starting to expand globally, and there will be some additional languages that will be added over time. But we are very proud to have all of our content now in what we call American Spanish, Mexican Spanish as to Spain Spanish. All right, moving forward, you've heard about Ask Reggie possibly in the past. This is our AI solution, super unique in the marketplace. It allows you to rapidly get answers, not search results. We're talking about answers to things that you may find within your state regulations. These are your specific regs for your state, whether it be for a large school, small school, in-home school, what have you. It allows you to get those regulations with just the click of a button and asking some questions. It also allows you to get right to CACFP regulations federally. The biggest change with this is you're able, as a portion of this solution, to ask questions against your own documents. So your SOPs, your operating procedures, your handbooks, your processes, your other procedures that you have, your health checks, any of those things that are in document form, but you would like people to be able to get immediate answers, you can do that through Ask Reggie. Also, it has levels of privilege, which means for this section here about asking about your documents, you can have a level where documents are only shared with your top executives. You can have documents that are shared for executive as well as your office staff. You can have documents that could be just for if you have franchise or satellite locations and you have specific documents for that. Maybe it's for documents like handbooks just for your entire team, or even to give access for parents to ask questions about specific content that you have. That's all built and being built into Ask Reggie. Everything that you have built in allows them also to have a reference directly to those documents right in here. So it not only answers the questions, but allows them to tunnel right into where those answers came from, so they can verify and learn a little bit more through those documents, really saving a ton of time. So there is a free version that everybody can take advantage of. And there's also coming out with a few paid versions that allow those who are going to be using this. Let's say you're part of a franchise and you love to learn and ask as many questions about the information that's been given to you by your franchisor. There's one of the many reasons why you would want to use it, as well as administrators, regional people, right down to teachership as to what they want to ask questions against your documents. Finally, with Inspire Care 360, we have IC 360 Rep. This is our star rating solution. You've seen this a couple times before for some of you, who, unless you're joining us for the first time. And this is a way to really have control over your star ratings. You know, one of the greatest challenges that I had when I first started my schools is, you know, when someone would come on, rarely did they were just giving positive reviews only in, you know, Google reviews or Facebook or whatever. You know, you sort of had the once in a while disgruntled staff member who would put a review on there along with some positive reviews, but there was really no incentives to have a positive review from all that great goodwill from your existing families, your existing staff, people after they went through a tour, or people who interviewed with your organization. Now with IC 360 Rep, you have the ability to not only request that directly from them, but you can then, if you get a 4 or 5 star rating, it automatically goes up on your desired site. It all, such as Google, Facebook, care.com, great schools, what have you. And if it's 3 or under, it comes to you. So you have the chance to work with that family or whoever might be staff member to see if you can improve that relationship. So it never actually goes up until that time. You have an opportunity really here to manage your reputation. And when it comes to our childcare business, your reputation is everything. It's difficult. You can't buy reputation. You can buy tools like this to support it, but at the end of the day, your reputation is the most meaningful thing that allows you to bring in new enrollments. Okay. And that comes from word of mouth as well as making sure that people see it. So there's a lot of different tools and functionality in this tool. If you want to learn more, reach out to Danielle. And so now it's time to bring on Jason. So we're welcoming Jason to the stage. And if he wants to pop on, Jason is a very experienced leader in education with over 20 years in private and public, specializing in startups and turnaround, which I'm really looking forward to talking to him about. This is something that he and I had a little bit of a talk right before the conversation started with us doing this presentation today. And that's his experience in change leadership. Certified, you know, by Harvard in change leadership. And I know that they've got a fantastic program over there from my previous life. An innovative problem solver, obviously, when you're coming in and you're looking to be a turnaround person and being a principal at schools prior and doing turnaround work, there's a lot involved and there's a lot of different dynamics that you're dealing with, not just a private employer, you're dealing with private, you're dealing with public, you're dealing with the public and your constituents. So there's a lot of things that I'm looking for and understanding more about Jason's ideas and thoughts. He has 3 schools today, couple up in the DC area, down in Georgia area, and he has 12 schools on their way. So congratulations, Jason. Sounds like you're starting to really take Eventus to the next level. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm even better for being here. So thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here. You know, I always act, you know, I say in here, like we never talked before, but yes, we talked a few minutes ahead of time here. I think you got the exact same suit. No, I think it's a slightly different suit, but
It
you do
is
have a
slightly.
close look. to your image. So you definitely fit the mold. But how's everything going for you today? And thank you so much for coming on board.
And thank you again for having me, and welcome to everybody. I saw through the chat we have an international group with us today. There are people all over the world joining us, and that's really exciting because I think the idea of leadership and the concept of leadership is something that is so far reaching that is of interest, especially now when there are so many competing priorities in organizations that we are participating in. So no matter what role we're playing, in one way, shape, or form, we're all leaders. So the idea of what it means to be a leader is not just something that may have historically been assigned to somebody with a particular title. Now, everyone is expected to be a leader in the role that they're serving in the organization that they're in.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I did see early on, I think it was Rania who popped in from the UAE, and that's wonderful to have her and team members like that on. So let's do this. Let's just jump right on in. And if you want to walk us a little bit through the discussion, and Jason and I are going to have more of a conversation today. We do have one slide to present, but for the most part, we're just going to have a little bit of a discussion. So take it, Jason.
Great, thanks. So I think the best way to kind of frame our conversation today would be for us to all engage in a process of reflection. So no matter who is on right now and whatever time and wherever you're calling in from, think of your own specific dynamic, where you are, what role you're serving, what organization you're in, and what particular challenges you might be facing in the role that you're currently holding. Because if we're going to talk about leadership, we want it to be practical. I'm not here to have a lecture experience. I'd rather have something concrete so that after we identify some of the challenges that require adaptive leadership experiences and strategies, we want to be able to take those conversations from today and then apply them into our own specific situations to try to find a way to, wherever we're at in our organization or in our own development, to go from where we are to where we want to be. We want some actionable tools, some action steps, some strategies to practice and then implement in our own unique situations. We're also going to look at school settings in particular. So if you are in a setting outside of a school, many of these strategies and contexts that we'll be discussing can definitely carry over, because leadership and guiding organizations is not specific to a particular industry. And then finally, we're going to talk about ways to stay resilient. The idea of adaptive leadership depends on resiliency. And if there's one thing we've learned coming out of COVID is that we need to be resilient. If we're not resilient, then we set ourselves up for failure, because organizations now, in particular schools, in particular within the school zone, early childhood education is constantly changing, whether it's through state engagement with the schools or the schools and communities themselves are changing rapidly. If we're not resilient, then we're not going to be in that constant state of readiness for the challenges and the movement that we might need to take our organization to bring it to a greater level of success.
Wonderful. And before we jump into the adaptive and defining some of that, if you don't mind, I would just love to get a little background, because we announced up front how you came from being a principal, and then we announced also about you having 3 ECE schools and getting into this. How did you jump that chasm? What happened there?
Well, it all started the day I was born. November 5th. Oh, wait, no, we'll fast forward to more recent times. But seriously, I have always loved education. I've always wanted to be a teacher. I was the type of student who would stay behind after dismissal to help the teacher organize her space. I erased the boards. I maybe snuck a piece of chalk or two home to play teacher when I was growing up. And when I started college, there was no doubt in my mind that I wanted to study education. And so I moved through the educational system from teacher to department chair to assistant principal to principal, and all in the elementary level. So I worked pre-K through 8 in all of my educational experience until I got to leadership, where the superintendent, when I was working in in Washington, D.C., the superintendent at the time said, we want to put you in this middle school because the middle school is kind of rough and we need a new leader in there. And I immediately fell in love with the idea of school improvement and turnaround. The idea that you can bring about such necessary improvement that is tangible, that is so impactful, that it supports the needs of the teachers, of the parents, of the students, such wide-ranging improvement that will be long-lasting. I saw that it was so rewarding and something that existed and lasted beyond my departure, right? And that's where I found the real need in my own mind and in my own practice to define what type of leader I wanted to be for my next school and every school thereafter. Because I saw leaders around me also in turnaround environments who had a different approach to leading their schools. And they were very like finger pointing, you do this, you do this, you do this. And while that leadership style may have brought about change, when they left, the improvements left with them because there was no buy-in. And I started to see that and I was like, that's it. Building the buy-in, building that shared ownership is what I need to continue to do. It's working for me, and I don't want to set any of my schools up for failure. And so I grew to become an area CEO of a large charter school network in Washington, D.C., with about 3,000 students and 3 campuses. And then I retired and I had an opportunity to open up a preschool, a single preschool. And that was it. That was my retirement. I'm going to open up this preschool because I felt, having worked in K-8, that early childhood was that secret sauce that no one really talks about. To get students school ready, we have to get them before school begins, right? Like it's not a no-brainer. Like it's there. Everyone recognizes it, but we don't really honor early childhood enough. And I saw the value in those students coming into my kindergartens who had strong early childhood experience. And I wanted to replicate that in the areas where I lived. So I got my first school, and a few months after starting my local competition, they were losing their license. So I negotiated a deal with the landlord to take over the lease. And in doing so, essentially acquired that second school. So without planning, I ended up with 2 schools. And then I got a call from a broker saying, hey, we got this third school not too far from you. Would you be interested in assuming the operations and just signing a lease? The person who's running it doesn't want to deal with early childhood anymore. I said, I'll do it. And because I've always been the type of guy where there's no reward without risk. And if you're going to go big, you got to go big, right? If you want those big rewards, you got to make those big risks. Not everybody is like that. Some people are risk averse, but I took that leap of faith. And a few months after I opened that third school, I actually got a phone call from a national chain asking if I'd be interested in selling my portfolio to them. In addition to those 3 schools, I had identified 2 other locations in the area that I was going to open. And I said, no. That's not part of my plan. Well, they called me back a few weeks later with literally an offer I could not refuse. So without planning this to be in my existence, I had an exit. So I sold my portfolio to a national chain. And then I got a phone call about a month after that, my second retirement, so to speak. And it was from a capital investor asking if I'd be interested in starting a company and taking a brand and school management approach nationally. And again, I couldn't say no. These things that come into your universe, you have to kind of read into where that might be pulling you and taking you, and what opportunities you might be eventually turning away by not really in discerning whether or not this is a good fit. And so I took that leap of faith and that risk in starting another company. And so Eventus Education was born. And within the last 6 or 7 months, we grew from 0 schools to now 15 in our pipeline, with 3 up and running now. And we have the additional 12 that are in various stages of due diligence. So that's kind of how I've made it to where I am today, sitting in this chair. But I have gotten here with a tremendous amount of risk having been taken in the past. And I think if there's one thing that I would want all of our participants from today's conversation to have as a takeaway is leadership requires risk. You
Yep.
can't be a leader if you're not willing to take the risks associated with leading and guiding people and organizations.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that background, because most of the people who join this call are owners and operators, and they've pushed their chips in, right? They've pushed their chips in to say, I want to make something happen. I want to make something different, but they're also looking for other areas of ideas, inspiration, and ways to take it to the next level. And so your experience, I hear, is just perfect timing for us on this. So why don't we jump right on in?
Great. And I also want to acknowledge that, especially for our owners and operators, we're also running businesses. So we want those risks to have a reward. And so the way that we take those risks, as calculated as they may be, the way that we lead and guide our organizations can actually increase the reward that we get, both in profitability, but also on the outcomes for our children and the success of our teachers and the happiness of our families, right? The rewards are not just monetarily, they're emotional rewards. There are concrete, tangible rewards. And we have to look at all those pieces to kind of gauge where we are on our journey to achieving the type of success we're looking for. But adaptive leadership in particular requires flexibility and responsiveness. I'll tell you one thing that's really, really important to understand is you can tell by the bookshelves behind me that leadership is a very popular topic to write about. There's a lot of research out there. There are a lot of books. There are a lot of webinars. There are a lot of motivational speakers that help support the development of leadership skills. But essentially, a leader is somebody who is responsible for guiding a vision. That's what a leader is. And it's not somebody who holds the title of leader. It's any person that's responsible for guiding a vision. It could be a teacher in the classroom. They are leading the group of children in their care. It could be the bus driver. They are leading the transportation journey for those children from one place to another. Every single person is a leader if they're responsible for guiding a vision and people look to them for guidance on what they should do and how they should do it. And the way that we choose to communicate determines the type of leader we are. So we can be adaptive leaders if we are flexible and responsive. What I mean by that is it requires us as leaders to be agile. We are not closed-minded. We're always looking for the next opportunity to grow. Leadership is a very broad topic in research, but I'd like to just focus all of the challenges that we as leaders face fall into one of two buckets. They're either technical or they're adaptive, hence the term adaptive leadership. Those technical challenges that we face as leaders are challenges where the problem is clear. The problem is known, and the solution is clear. The solution is known. You walk into your center and the toilet won't flush. It's a plumbing problem. You don't need to think much about it, but who do you call? The expert, the plumber. You don't need to put together a committee. You don't need to send a survey. It's a technical problem and it has a technical solution, clear cut. But the reality is, if we're leading an organization that involves people and systems, most of our challenges are adaptive, which means the problem is not always known. So it's murky at best, most of the time unclear. So the solution requires learning on the part of the leader in order to determine how to address the problem. The research shows that the number one failure in leadership is when a leader addresses an adaptive problem with a technical solution. That's research based.
So Jason, let me jump in on
Yeah.
that. Give us an example.
Perfect. So a perfect example would be an adaptive problem, something that is unknown. For example, your enrollment might be declining. Okay? There could be a myriad of reasons of why that is the case.
Sure.
But if you go in with a single solution and you say, the reason why it's happening is because I need a new director, I'm changing the director, right? That is an uneducated response, similar to how you would with a technical challenge when you just a single solution to that problem. But in reality, adaptive problems are much more complex and have multiple pieces to it. But if you go in technically, well, it must be the director. The director is the lead of the school, and enrollment's not growing because of that. Without doing your research and listening and discussions with the various stakeholders involved, you might actually be making the problem worse. And people around you are going to develop a fear because what is happening is now they're seeing you in reactive mode, which is what technical problems require. They require a reaction. Adaptive problems require a process. And that's where the leadership piece of adaptive leadership comes into play.
Great. Let me ask you this before we get more, get in depth with adaptive leadership, which I'm really glad we're talking about, and the way you defined it between technical. Help the audience maybe define the difference between leadership and management, which are two very different things. But I think oftentimes in people who maybe they're more of a novice in it or more they've just grown into the role, they sort of see management and leadership the same thing. But as we know, extremely different.
Yes. I see management as task specific. Management is the completion of specific tasks that support the successful drive of an organization. Okay, a person is a manager because they manage. They are overseeing specific expectations and they're measuring those expectations to the outcomes they're looking for. Very task oriented. That's management. Leadership is personal. Leadership is relationship building. It's relationship based. You can be a manager and not a leader.
Yeah.
Right? You can also be a leader and not a manager. You may not be a good leader, but if you're also not focused on those outcomes, then you're just somebody's really good friend and you can't say no. And then everybody gets time off and you forgot you gave everybody time off and now nobody's working in the building that day. Like, oh, I was too kind, right? So they go hand in hand. But if you're isolated in one or the other, then you're disconnected from the success that each of those roles, as different as they are, need to bring.
And I think one of the things, just getting back to what you were saying about the person who came in and was very good at telling people what to do, and then they leave and it all goes with them. That is more of a management flavor there. That is like, and a lot of junior people, they come up from being an assistant teacher to a teacher to maybe a program manager, assistant director to maybe your director, but they learn from observing that all you do is tell people what to do as to truly leading. So let's hit the stage there for adaptive leadership.
Right. And just to piggyback off of what you said, to springboard into adaptive leadership, first-year directors are also very good at saying, well, this worked for me as a teacher, so it must work for you. And that direct, like, well, it's going to work because I did it and it worked for me, is a disconnect from the type of relationship building and understanding that adaptive leadership requires. Because a classroom dynamic is a perfect example of an environment where adaptive leadership is essential, because there are no two classrooms alike. And there are no two teachers in those classrooms that are alike. So to go in and to say, well, do this because it worked for me is unfair, because it doesn't involve the engagement of interaction between the leader and the teacher. And it doesn't involve the listening and the observation and the strategizing, so that when the leader leaves, what is being implemented is owned by the teacher as opposed to being complied, right? I'm doing it because I was told, not because I understood this to be the best way.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you were saying that, because the different styles are both on the end of the leader or person who is, supposedly in charge, as to the person on the reception side. When you look at how do people really engage, one thing that you mentioned earlier is when they are part of the solution. And that really dovetails into leadership, because leadership is about helping people find what works for them, not what just works for you, like you mentioned about early stage directors.
That's right. And when you're creating a school community, you have to have it's for me, it's a non-negotiable. You have to have shared ownership of expectations, shared ownership of expected outcomes. Because if everybody in that building signs on to the mission, if everybody in that building is in agreement of what we want our children to experience in those classrooms, what we want our families to feel and hear and see when they walk into our buildings, it's going to happen. But if a director or an owner comes in and says, these walls need to be decorated with these things, everybody will comply, but no one's going to maintain it. No one's going to keep, because they're going to wait for that next directive. I didn't take it down because you didn't tell me to, right?
Mhm.
They're not going to have that buy-in that creates the internalization of that mission and vision of that particular school. You're going to have a bunch of people who are just solely going through the motions and waiting for the directions that come from above. Right? Technical leadership management comes from the top down. It's that chain of command, that flow chart, which I'd love to abolish. I'm a big fan of flat hierarchy, right? I love the idea that CEOs can be accessible. I get the idea of a chain of command, but the CEO is a person too. But if you see somebody in organizational design so far above your reach, then there's no connection. And then you see yourself much lower than that person. In reality, and CEOs may not like this, but the teachers and the directors, they're far more important than the CEO because
Oh,
they're keeping the
absolutely.
operations moving. They're keeping those children engaged. They're keeping that CEO working to
Yeah.
help grow that organization. We're so interconnected, but hierarchies and organizational charts tend to separate the connection. And adaptive leadership is about flattening it and bringing people together.
And that's really great. And I got a question for you on this too. I was just meeting with my team with some of my schools, and the way I like to say it is we don't have this hierarchy of top down. What we have is we're shoulder to shoulder with different roles that we play to support one another. And to us, that is the way I want them envisioned. And one of the things I also mentioned to them this past week was, because they were calling themselves, one person was calling themselves management. I was like, when you go to a public school, I go, do you go to the management office? Do you go to the principal's office? No, you go to administration.
That's right.
So you have administration who plays a role. You have teachers who play a role. You have bus drivers who play a role. So let me ask you this question. And I'm sure I don't, this is good because we're having a conversational piece of this. There's people on here going, that's what I want to get to. I have these directors. I might have multiple directors in different locations, or maybe it's just me as a director. How do you start the foundation? What is the foundation of creating this adaptive leadership style in how you can start having that spawn? Obviously, through your work with the public schools, the charter schools, then your own ECE world, where do you believe, you start to look at the foundation?
I would say that there are 4 stages that we would want to kind of look at. The very first is what I like to call get on the balcony. When you go on a balcony, you kind of have this overarching view of everything that's below you and happening. So you're not too close to it where you miss something that might be happening, right? So get on the balcony and take that big perspective of your organization, of your center, to see that bigger picture. Okay. Before you can hone in on areas that you might want to address to support and grow, you have to see where those areas fit in the bigger picture. So get on the balcony, look at your entire organization, take that step back if you need to, and it helps you identify any particular issues that might be very glaring from the higher level that you may totally miss when you're doing the deeper dive. So that would be the first piece. And then you won't be able to identify root causes until you get to that next level. So you're actually decreasing in that altitude, right? So you have that balcony, you have that overview. From there, you have to recognize that if you're going to bring about change and you're going to implement adaptive leadership, which requires everybody's participation in helping find the solution, it's going to create tension and discomfort. You have to acknowledge it. You can't shy away from it. You have to own it and embrace it. You have to embrace that disequilibrium, that thing that makes you kind of imbalanced. Because if you embrace it, then you're going to be open to change, because you can't change if you're comfortable. You have to create that discomfort in order to change.
Can you give me an example, or our audience an example of what that is like? I think we understand that, but what are the kind of things that you may do that create discomfort, just as an example? And then how does that foster change?
In the ECE world, I think there's a lot of island creation, meaning the teachers like their classrooms and they
Yeah.
close their door and this is my island. I am the leader of this room. And so any type of intrusion into that space and on that island is a little bit of discomfort for that teacher, because now their world might be a little shaken. So for a director to come in or an owner to come in and discuss a new curriculum, right? Well, we've been doing these lesson plans every single year. Look, they're laminated. So if they get wet, we can just wipe them off. But you know what? Some of that material might be so dated, the research has changed, right? Those countries don't exist anymore, right? Or whatever it is that we're working with, just because it was in place doesn't mean it needs to remain in place. So now the creation of a new instructional style or new activities that they're not familiar with or used to, that is uncomfortable because it's unknown and it creates that discomfort. But give into the process, buy into it, and that growth and that change will come. And then we can look back and revisit it. Was it successful? If it was, what areas do we want to keep? Were there some challenges? What can we do for the next change to make it less challenging? That constant state of revisiting the process to make sure that as you continue the process, you're making the adjustments based on what you're learning through it, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a perfect example. And another thing, state regulations. State regulations are changing all the time in early childhood. And so what a director might know to be true around a licensing compliance piece, the state may have changed it. But if the director is so closed off to like, this is what the state wants, even though the changes have been communicated, to get out of what you feel you know to what changes are on the way, that's uncomfortable as well. Because
Yeah.
directors love to take pride in the strength of their abilities around compliance, but compliance is always changing. So
Yeah.
being open to those changes that come your way.
Awesome. You talked about 4 stages. You got to level 2. First was the balcony, and second one was really about recognizing change. What is stage 3?
To regulate the distress, right?
Okay.
So you have to balance the emotional well-being of your staff, the emotional well-being of your families, while pushing for growth or change. Because as you're going about change management within your organization and that discomfort starts to grow, you have to be able to regulate it. Because what you don't want is you don't want a tornado of emotions carrying everybody far and wide into areas that really derail any type of growth. Nor do you want to prevent continuing implementing change because of how people are feeling. That doesn't mean you discount their feelings, you acknowledge it, but you have to be able to communicate the necessity of that change for people to get over themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And that's important, because if you have that buy-in, it's okay to be upset about change. It's okay. But it's not okay to allow that energy and those emotions to stop the director or the leader from implementing them, because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. No. Because ultimately, if the outcome is a better opportunity for the students, a better opportunity for the staff or families, that's the goal. And it might upset some people along the way, but if your focus is on the outcome, and it's a positive outcome, it's worth the collateral damage. People will get over it. Okay? People will get over it. And if they don't, well, that's a good indication that maybe they weren't the right fit for the type
Right.
of dynamic organization you're setting up that school to be.
That's awesome. And before you get on to the fourth stage, Patrice asked, how often do you meet with your leadership team? How big is that team, Jason?
At Eventus, I have a head of schools who oversees all of our directors. I have a director of finance, and we are hiring a business manager to help support operations. Regionally, we've recently hired a regional director to support our schools in Georgia and Florida, and the directors will be supported by that person because we feel that proximity is really important for leaders, right? I don't want to have our leadership team concentrated at our central office in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC, and feel so disconnected from the important work that's going on at our schools. So having a local leadership presence is really important. So I try to also keep our leadership team slim so that we don't have too many people to go to, right? If we don't have to have a directory, and people get frustrated when they make that phone call and you have to listen to the teleprompt. To reach this person, dial 500. You have to listen to 499 other prompts to try to get that one person. We try to have a very streamlined support system for all of our schools. I meet with my leadership team every week, and my head of schools meets with her directors every week. But then you also have those Teams calls and those phone calls, which happen in between those days. But communication is key. Communication is
Absolutely.
key.
Yeah. For instance, with my team, I meet once a week with the director group along with my administrators. And then we have a senior leadership meeting where we talk about some strategy. But then my regional meets daily with a huddle every morning. So you're right. Communication is key. And just because we're running so quick here with time, I want to get to the fourth stage, fourth one, and then anything else we can talk about because we got a lot of things going on.
Yep. The fourth and final piece of that is engagement with family and communities. So while you're going through this change management process and you are trying to build that buy-in within your community, we have to understand that the community that I'm referring to is much larger than the students and staff in your building, and even much larger than the parents as well. The key word in leadership is called stakeholder, right? Stakeholder is anybody who has a vested interest or has an impact as a result of that organization's existence. So your families, your local community, your small businesses, your local job providers, anybody, and employers, like anybody in that nucleus of that school, you need to engage them in this process. So the communication of the types of changes that are on the horizon or in play are of known to everybody. You don't want to catch anybody by surprise because then you're not going to get the buy-in. You're not going to have that essential connection with your stakeholders to bring about the type of change you're looking for. So adaptive leadership means being receptive to feedback as you engage those stakeholders. Parents may not always like the changes. Tuition increases, right? That's a perfect example. It's a necessity to support our teachers in their compensation, to support the materials and supplies that are needed for the school, rising costs on the operation side. It's logical, but it's not easy to accept. So having that constant communication with parents and with others involved in the organization and being receptive to that feedback, knowing that you're actively gauging the pulse of your wider community to either continue the journey, or it might just be at that point where you revisit whether or not now is the time and the place to make those changes.
Sure.
So not being so deadheaded in that we're doing this whether you like it or not. We're going to do this. This is why. And as you go through the implementation process, learn from that journey to determine whether or not you want to continue or adjust your strategy.
Excellent. Let me throw you a little bit more. It's not exactly a softball, but it's also not a hardball. Let's say that you are, and the reason I say this, because I think a lot of operators here run to this relatively on a common basis. And that is you're implementing change.
Yes.
You're implementing leadership elements, part of a vision that you've painted. and you believe you have your staff as part of it and their participation, it is new to staff, it's new to families, and that oftentimes creates what I call the whisper campaign between teachers and families of, does leadership know exactly what they're doing here? Okay, I think we've all run into that at some point. What is your approach to the dynamics of leading your team and your families through change so you stay, and this sort of dovetails into your communication side, but is there a formula that you sort of apply, even though it is, because it's obviously adaptive, it's not technical, but is there a formula approach that you apply when you're looking at change of that nature?
First, I start that process internally, okay? Because what you don't want to do is start talking about change if you don't have a plan for its implementation and what you're expecting to get from it, because then it's disorganized, and you're going to have more people questioning than understanding. So you have to start internally. Why the change? Before you identify that, you have to say, well, what is happening that I want to change? So what is the root cause? What is the issue that needs to be addressed? So that creates your why, okay? And then after you have that why, you have to now internally create that how. If we are to do this, how should we do it? And that's when you start to loop in a smaller group of leaders, support system, other directors, other owners, to use their experience to see if they had a similar issue. That helps give you some nuggets of context of ways to implement it. And then once you have a soft plan, you start to communicate to families, to teachers, to your director, to whoever is next on that, in that nucleus, that expansion of your school community. And then you have transparency. I think transparency is so underrated because people are afraid to tell the truth. Rising costs. I'll give you a perfect example with costs. No one likes to talk about money, but the reality is it's getting more and more expensive to operate schools. Insurance rates are going through the roof. We want to start compensating our teachers more effectively and appropriately. We want to improve our facility for our students to have a better learning experience, and giving families and teachers the data, the documentation, the proof. This is what it costs us. This is what we want to yield as an outcome. And this is the gap. And this is what we want to do to close that gap. I believe in transparency. I believe in honesty. And those are two things that are often missing in the corporate world. And we need to return to transparency and honesty, because then parents may not like it, but they'll at least understand. And then you will create a very strong bond with parents, because they know when they talk with you, you're not just giving them a smokescreen of corporate jargon that just shoos them away. That they're gonna stay connected to the school because they enrolled for a reason, and they're gonna stay for a reason. But they'll also leave if they have no idea what you're doing and just things start happening, and
No,
they need to be engaged.
you're bringing up a great point there, Jason, alone. And obviously we could even do a webinar on that, because at the end of the day, it also is consistency, I believe, in everything you talked about. If you're transparent on just your increases in tuition, oh, that's great. But if you have a CPS issue that goes on at your school, and parents are just like, well, what happened? What happened? I have no idea what happened. You're creating more issues that you do not need in the back of those parents' heads when you can just be transparent about it. But it's going to get published anyhow somewhere, within your licensing. So it is best that you do that. Jason, we've already run out of time.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And we probably didn't get through half of this. So I'm going to ask you, maybe if you want to come back in the fall and we can do a second half here.
Sure, absolutely.
I love the amount of engagement. We had a lot of chat in the webinar area here, and I want to thank you greatly. I still have to do a small little raffle. So I have a little raffle machine here that
I hope I win.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, you're taken out of this. But since you are someone who partners with us, we'll take care of you on the back end. So, but Jason, I want to really thank you. You've brought a fresh perspective for us, and I really would like to have you be part of some other things that we have in the future, including some panels and stuff. So you've just done some great work here, and I think everybody gave you some big accolades in the comments too.
Well, wonderful. I can't wait to see. Thank you so much for, again, having me here. And for everybody who's watching, good luck on your journey, supporting the most vulnerable in our society, which are our youngest learners. And so thank you for getting them closer to success. And I appreciate that.
All right. Well, you're welcome to stay on or go off video. That's up to you. I have to do just a couple little housekeeping things as we go, and we're going to continue. And thank you again, Jason, for your time. And so just to finish up here, let me make sure that we're shared, because a lot of times this is where people don't get to see the shared portion still. We want to make sure we get here and here. All right, and we went through here. We did obviously talk to Jason. There is some contact information. If we could have that dropped in the chat, if someone, his email especially. So jlody@eventuseducation.com if you have any questions for Dr. Jason. And again, as we mentioned before, we put certificate completions. I'm sure that's getting put into the chat again. We do have the raffle. And let me see if we use our special tool here. I'm going to do the raffle chat and see what we come up with. And I'm putting into our special tool, and Robin Norden. Robin, if you are on the call still, you have a $100 gift certificate to Discount School Supply. And Danielle will be reaching out to you, or you can reach out to Danielle to make sure you get that gift certificate. So thank you so much, Robin, and everybody else for attending today. It's fantastic that you are here. Our next conversation, save the date, is just in 2 weeks. And this is with Prina Richards. She is the CEO and founder of Together We Grow, transforming your program for stressful to joyful. I love the concept of that. Absolutely. Identifying the brain states and behaviors associated with each state, describing the 3 types of stress and influencing on teaching and leading. So this really dovetails well into Jason's presentation, and lists practical strategies to transform stress to joy. So we look forward to you attending that one. Again, thank you so much for attending. This is Tony D'Agostino. I am the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360. I couldn't do any of this without my amazing team who is doing the things and the work in the background. It's easy enough for me to sit up here and talk to someone wonderful like Jason and some other team members, but you notice like what Sarah is doing in the background, what Danielle is doing, Jacob is doing, and other team members out there. They're really working hard so you guys can get this additional information that hopefully helps out you in your schools. And again, if there's things that we can do to help out, we are there for you. Again, have a wonderful day, have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Take care, everybody.